Hi, and welcome to Dipping It Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I'm very fortunate it's Monday, as it's been recorded with the wonderful and Wintemute. Now, I said I was going to get it right. It's just the
You
most
did it.
amazing surname I've ever heard. And and Anne is the founder of Aimee Says, and she's going to tell us a bit more about it and explain the kind of reason why she does it behind the idea. And so over to you, Anne. Lovely to see you.
It's so wonderful to be with you right now, my morning, your afternoon, Lucy. Yes, I am the co-founder of Aimee Says, and Aimee is an AI-enabled companion and assistant for anyone who is currently experiencing relationship abuse or who has ended the relationship, is either processing what they've been through, or what happens to many people, especially if there's a marriage or children, is that they will continue to experience what we call post-separation abuse. So Aimee is our best effort to give people the same kind of, like, for example, digital health tool that they would have with any other kind of health or life complicating experience that they might have. So she can do everything from helping you understand your situation to a lot of that kind of administrative documentation, evidence collection, collating, organizing, labeling, tagging, etc. To try to make things hopefully as easy as possible for survivors in this experience that they never wanted, they didn't deserve, but they're going to have to deal with regardless, because the only way out is through for
Oh,
this particular
oh,
experience.
100%. And I think, you've just touched on it there. There is so much to process. There is so much, especially if it's the fact that obviously it's been abuse during the relationship and then obviously post separation abuse, which many people either haven't heard of or aren't aware of. And it's that kind of, when we say, well, why didn't they just leave? It then the narrative changes to, well, you've left now, so therefore everything should be okay. And unfortunately, as we well know, it's the most dangerous time when you're leaving. It takes an average of 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. And so trying to collate all these thoughts in your head, get everything down, and it may be things that have been going on for many, many, many years. And so psychologically, you're in that loop of trying to work through all of this. And, I think that's exactly why something like this as a tool and an app is so important. Really, just to say, I'm here, you're not on your own. You don't have to do this alone.
Yes, and we have that the perpetrator's narrative in our head, and then we're gaslighting ourselves, right? Because we didn't want
Yeah.
this situation, we didn't want this to happen, we don't want these things to be true. And maybe the abuser was right, maybe we're oversensitive, maybe we're crazy, maybe this is because of some childhood trauma that we experienced. And when you put all of that together, it's incredibly difficult to get a kind of organized and objective perspective
Yeah.
with all of that counter truth narrative going on through your head. So even just writing down like that thing that happened last night and making sure that it gets captured or documented, that little task is kind of overwhelmed with a tsunami of, well, I don't want to write it. This isn't what I want to be happening, or maybe I misunderstood that situation, and we lose those opportunities. But Amy's able to make sure that you feel supported through it and to capture that critical information before it's gone.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And I think we were just talking about this prior to recording, is it is so important because for a lot of people, they'll think, potentially if they have children as well, is some of the stuff could be quite damning and also quite damaging to someone's mental health, in terms of if children come across, because we all know, I know my children are all, when they were younger, were always on my phone, and they know more about phones than we do these days. My kids could download apps and I go, I don't even know what's going on. So we know that if children are maybe being able to access that kind of information, obviously, and want to protect the children, it can be really scary for parents who are thinking, well, I need to keep this information, but I'm not sure who I trust, because obviously a massive part of it, as we know, around domestic abuse and post-separation abuse is trying to build that trust again. And also if you're in a situation where, and many people are, you've been isolated from your family and friends, and therefore who do you trust with this information that you may need further down the line? And not saying that you necessarily will, but like you say, it's knowing that something that happened yesterday, and unfortunately with abuse, things change day to day. And because the perpetrator is looking for new ways and new angles, and so it's a very fast-paced trauma to be dealing with, because they will look for different ways to, like you say, try and tie you up in knots and get you all wondering if you're sane, wondering if it is all your fault. And so having something where you can clearly put this information down and then go back to it and reread, it may be that actually you can add, there might be something to add to that particular incident that has then evolved. So things like that around Aimee Says is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, there's I think three things in there that I want to grab onto. So one is like let's quickly clarify the free tool and the subscription
Yeah.
tool. So right now, tens of thousands of people from most of the countries across the globe have had conversations, anonymous, unsaved conversations with Aimee. Those are perfect for like, is this in my head? I'm feeling
Yeah.
crazy. Would it be safe for me to set a boundary like this? I want to do some safety planning, or how do I get my mom to understand my situation? Simple, direct, describe the background, get the kind of thought processing guidance. And it's anonymous. It disappears when you navigate away. There's no record of it. It can't be found unless you save a PDF. That is an option. You can save a PDF. But in order to have the memory and all of the support with the documentation, a user will need a subscription because that creates an account, a place where that information can be stored. So I want to clarify that real quick so that as we continue to talk about it, people know that they can come have those free conversations, but most of the kind of memory-based things would need an account so we can safely store that information for people. And one of the things you said is it's moving so quickly. And one of the big barriers people have to making sure they're capturing and documenting those things is in the moment, that thing that just happened feels like the most important thing that you will never forget, right? And you tell
Yes.
yourself, I
Yeah.
won't forget. It's ruined my entire day or week, or, it's required a doctor's visit. Your future self will absolutely forget it or will absolutely forget those important details around it. And that's part of why documentation is so important. So even when something feels like there's no way I could forget this, how could I possibly forget it?
Yeah.
Write it down.
Yeah.
And that the process of documenting can be incredibly laborious. Where do I write it down? Is the place I'm writing it down safe? Is this
Yeah.
somewhere that my kids are going to see it? Right? There's hidden. Most phones have the option to kind of hide videos and audio and images.
Yeah.
Certainly use. Who do I send it to? All of these barriers. And I don't want to take the time to do this. I want to spend a minute, like, taking a deep breath, not
Yeah.
documenting this
Yeah.
horrific experience that I'm going through. So with Aimee, if there is a paid account, when you start a chat with Aimee in a very kind of cathartic, supported, trauma-informed, evidence-based way, you'll have this back and forth about that thing that happened and how upsetting it was. And she's going to automatically grab out of that conversation whatever those key details were and make that event entry for you. She's going to automatically tag it with the types of abuse that were present. There was a physical threat. There was verbal yelling. There's gaslighting in here. It's restricting autonomy. She's going to label that. And then when you go into your events, whenever you need to, some people like to look at them a lot. It helps them understand what's going
Yeah.
on. But maybe you don't want to unless one day you actually need all of
Need
that
to. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And everything that you shared with her will be cataloged in there. It'll be put on a timeline. It's put into bubble charts so you can see, like, wow, it's primarily psychological abuse, is the tactic that was used against me in this relationship. You can absolutely, attach, upload evidence, fill out more details into any of those events that you want. But what we've tried to do is make it so you can just have that hug, companion, advocate conversation that you need in the moment for all the weight of what you're experiencing, and have the rest of that done by AI. I mean, I can't think of a better use of AI than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we talk about that kind of psychological element, and I know from work I've done myself, is many, many people will say, well, it wasn't abuse because they didn't hit me. We're still, unfortunately, in society, that very common misconception that, contrary to popular belief, abuse isn't always about the physical. There are very, 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 very subtle elements to abuse that go on. And so to have something like this where it may be that you're still processing the fact that you may still be questioning, is it abuse? And so to have an age like that that can explain, well, okay, and we do, don't we? We hear all these terms banded around like coercive control, gaslighting, love bombing, trauma bonding. If you've never really thought about the relationship in those terms, they're all just words. They're just
Yeah.
words, aren't they, that apply to other people? Because most of us would say, oh, well, that would never happen to me until it does happen to you. And
Yeah.
then it's a very different story. And that's where I think it's so important that something like this is there, because it really fills in those blanks, doesn't it, for people?
It does. I think that AI as a conduit, as a thing that connects two other things, right? That brings them
Yeah.
together, that creates kind of an energy stream between them. The conduit between people's experience, right? Which they might not call trauma bonding. They might
Yeah.
not call coercive control. Maybe they're not comfortable saying that they've experienced abuse in this relationship. And we take that and we can create this conduit to everything we know about power and control dynamics and what abuse is and where kind of the line of harm begins, right? And how far that line goes. And we can create a really tight connection between those two things in a way that helps people stop saying to themselves, which I totally understand, there's no blaming in here, stop saying to themselves, well, that didn't happen to me, or that couldn't happen to me. Because if I know one thing, it is that abuse transcends absolutely every dynamic, every dimension we think makes us different.
Yes.
Right. Well, I'm different because I'm educated. I'm different because
Yes.
earn X amount of dollars a year, or I'm different because pick your reason for why
Yeah.
you think that you're different from someone who experiences abuse, and then remind yourself that it transcends that. There's lots of people just like you, whatever that you is,
Yeah.
right? Who've been victimized. But there's so much discomfort around identifying as a victim, which is fine if you don't want to use that language.
Yeah.
But telling ourselves, well, I'm not being hit, so it's not happening to
Mm.
me, is it's protective, right? We're trying to protect ourselves. But that kind of misnomer about what abuse is really prevents a lot of people from self-identifying and prevents a lot of people who are perpetrating harm from being held accountable. At the end of the day, if one person in the relationship has more power than the other person and they use that power to privilege their own needs, you are in a relationship with a power and control dynamic that is hurting you.
Yes. 100%.
If if
100%.
if on a piece of paper you have a choice, but you don't really feel like you have a choice, then that's the relationship that you're in.
Yeah.
And harm is happening. You
Yeah.
deserve support for that harm. You deserve to be able to name it, to understand it, to find ways to either, to make yourself safer and healthier. It isn't about, all of the times you're getting beat up. It's about the times you're
Yeah.
being beat down.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that the way you've just described it as well. For so many, they will say that the psychological, the scars that leave, the number of times I get messages saying, if it were anything else, then maybe I could process it. But it's the psychological scars. It's building up that self-esteem again, that self-worth, that why me, and all the things you have every right to question because it's your life. But what I love about this is, and we've just been talking about this previously, is it's this about the power and control dynamic, is this is actually giving you back the power and control. You're in charge of what you are keeping hold of and what you're evidencing for the future, what you may need. And that's your way of being able to say, actually, I am in control of this. Because, and also for your own mental health, being able to, I know very often, if I write things down or if I put them into a system of whatever it is, I feel better, because otherwise, as a lot of us do, it swirls around our head. And for many victims and survivors, and again, I sort of call it spinning 50,000 plates. For these people, they may be trying to hold down a job, look after
Mm.
children, potentially take care of parents, depending on what age they are. There's so many different things that are going on. And in any life without abuse, that's a lot to deal with. Add into it abuse and trying to process all these things and having it going around, being able to take that to one side and say, okay, I may not be able to control everything, but actually I'm in control of this.
Yes, yes. I mean, abuse is a crime of disempowerment, right? It's
Yeah,
a disempowerment. One person has usurped the power of the other. They get more power in making decisions, in who's accountable, in whose needs get met, right?
yeah,
It is a crime of disempowerment, and it can be really difficult for people to find where they get that power back. And one of the things I see a lot is I get that power back by making that other person see that what they've done is wrong.
yeah.
And I just want to say that is also disempowering because you are giving your power to that other person to determine are they going to take accountability? Are they going to acknowledge the thing that they did? And for you to feel empowered, they
Yeah,
have to, right? But if abusers were good at taking accountability and acknowledging the harm that they did, 10 million people in the United States alone wouldn't be victimized by domestic violence each year.
yeah,
Things would look fundamentally different. But there is incredible empowerment in being like, I know my truth. I
yeah,
wrote my truth down. I uploaded the screenshots. I have the receipts,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That is empowering. Knowing the truth is empowering. Knowing that, or hoping at least more, because I don't want to disillusion people about the family court system, but
yeah,
knowing put
yeah.
all this stuff down. I've got the receipts, I got the pictures, I have all of it. It's labeled, it's tagged, it's exportable. That knowing that you have that in the moment that you need it is also incredibly empowering. It
Yeah.
will not make the abuser stop.
No,
Really, truly nothing that we can say or do that will make that stop, that will make them, take accountability.
yeah.
But there is power in knowing your truth, in writing it down, and having clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It's like we are on the same wavelength. But I was going to come up and talk about the idea of accountability because I think this is one thing that many people don't understand or appreciate when it comes to abusers. You know, the questions are always, well, why would someone choose to abuse, and why would they do this, and why would they do that? Is it learned behavior? Is it their childhood? Is it all these other things? And as you said, you know, that's the word is accountability. They do not take accountability for their actions. And they flip the script and say, actually, it's all your fault. You're the reason this is happening. You're the reason X, Y, and Z. And so being able to, like you say, write down your own truth. And I remember somebody once saying, and in terms of perpetrator talking and saying, oh, there's two sides to every story. And I remember thinking, but there's only one version of the truth.
Yeah.
You know, you can have two sides all you want. But if one person is not taking accountability, if one person is constantly shifting the goalposts, because I would say it's a bit like running a marathon dealing with a perpetrator, and especially post separation abuse, but the finish line keeps moving further and further away because that's what they do. And I mean, we could spend hours talking about the family court system, but that maybe is a whole other episode. But there in itself is where you need to be able to evidence things, where you need to be able to say, actually, because that again is constantly moving and changing for the victim and survivor. Um, and so that fact that they can't take accountability, and I think for many people, once they can understand that, again, that gives you some clarity and some truth is you can't, because you're looking at it from an empathetic point of view. Well, I could never do that to another human being. No, you couldn't, and that's why you're not an abuser. But an abuser is going to do all those things because they don't think that they're wrong.
No, they feel entitled to do
Yes.
that. The world does demand accountability, but they will shift that accountability onto their victim or onto someone else
Someone, yeah,
often, right? If they can't attribute it to their victim, then it's their boss or,
yeah,
or their father that raised them or
yeah,
whatever. There is a poverty of accountability on their end, but they certainly expect that the accountability for their actions be absorbed by the people that they're harming.
yeah,
They the goalposts moving. It's often around accountability, right? The closer you get to thinking that there might be some accountability on their side, the
yeah,
goalposts move. Or around resolution, right? They resist
yeah,
resolution because their power only exists in so much as they're able to dominate. If
yeah,
there's a resolution, like resolution, true resolution is a re-equivocating of power,
yeah.
right? True resolution, so that they cannot have that. That is intolerable, right? They need to
It,
have that power dynamic. They need to feel like they have power. So they'll
yeah,
also resist that resolution. But that's a great time for documentation to come in because maybe that resolution is we need to decide on a place where our child goes to school, or our child needs
Yeah.
an evaluation for this, or we need to get these financial matters in order. And so long as they are able to prevent resolution by creating all this chaos and a lack of clarity and moving those goalposts, they will likely be successful. And that documentation helps really cement those goalposts in the ground, right?
Yeah.
Like just being a toothpick into some soft soil. Really cement those into the ground, give you kind of an anchor to work around that you can build your documentation towards. But I think it's important to identify both of those things, both the avoidance of accountability and the
Yeah.
avoidance of resolution,
Yeah.
because both of those things bring the power dynamic into equilibrium. And
Yes.
that is antithetical to the kind of personality type, the drive, motivation of
Mm.
people who choose to dominate
Yeah.
other people in order to have their own needs met.
That's so true, and I think that's something isn't touched on enough is the fact that they don't want resolution. And I think for anybody that's listening, it's really important to know that you are not the problem. If you're there saying, "Look, I just want what's best for my kids," or "I just want what's best for us to be able to both move forward with our lives," and basically whether it's dealing with the finances, whatever it is, if children, etc., aren't involved, but it's the fact that, like you say, they don't want that resolution. For them, chaos is key.
Yep.
Keeping you on your toes, keeping you wondering and second guessing every move they make. But I said in a talk a while ago, the interesting thing is you as a victim survivor are a better what's the word I'm looking for? Not judge, but you know the perpetrator better than anyone.
Mhm.
You are the expert in that perpetrator because, and actually, that gives you a sense of empowerment because you actually know if you sit down and think, okay, I'm going to come up with this resolution, you know in your heart of hearts, they ain't going to go for that. So you're already one step ahead. So whether it is that you document that and say, well, I was coming up with this resolution, and then you know what's coming next, you can almost be a step ahead going, so now I'm going to have to think of this instead. And so it does give you that power, and you are the best experts of that perpetrator. You know them. They don't think you know them. They think they've confused you and they're very cunning but actually, they don't realize that they've created somebody in the sense that they can go, actually, I know exactly what you're going to do because I've lived with it for long enough. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. You made a relationship of studying them, right? You had
Yes.
to stay safe, to try to keep a sense of balance, to read the room, to understand when their moods were shifting, when they were changing. And it's really hard early on before a lot of healing is done to be able to feel like you can be a step ahead,
Yeah.
because that step ahead requires like a whole other layer has happened. And that layer is I accept that I didn't create this, that this is not my responsibility. I accept that I cannot change them. That's a thing that has to happen before you can try to,
Yeah.
get one step ahead.
Yeah.
My actions will not change their abusive behavior. My kind of domain of control is in documenting it and understanding what my priorities are and working towards those priorities. When you get to a certain level of healing, and clarity, which I do think comes through, things like using Aimee, right? Working with a really good therapist or a rare but really good attorney. We can make those gains so that we can get to a point where, yeah, I'm not triggered. It's hard to be a step ahead when you're triggered by things. I understand how this person is going to respond to my proposal. Here's how I can make it appear as though there isn't a resolution that is satisfactory to me because they need to have that upper hand, but still get you closer to that goal that you want. Those are all things that come through experiencing kind of re-empowerment, if you will, clarity, good support, not continuing to give your power away by believing that something you say or do will change their attitude, make them take accountability, etc. When we get really centered in our power again, we
Yeah.
can absolutely be two steps ahead, three steps ahead. Um,
Yeah, and that's exactly why this kind of work is so important because it gives you that clarity to be able to look back and assuming you can go back, edit things. So if you think, well, like we said before, things have changed, things have evolved, things have moved 20 steps on since whenever. Um, that is there a limit to how much you can store, if you like? Because I know with some victims and survivors I've worked with, people, the general public would not believe, or society would not believe that there can be, we're talking thousands of emails. If you're in some kind of conversation with your ex-partner and you're trying to deal with things, we're talking sometimes, 20, 30 messages a day, especially if stalking and harassment is part and parcel of the post-separation abuse, if they're going through court proceedings, if social services, children's services are involved, if the police are involved. There's a lot of information coming from a lot of places, and people will have thousands of emails and correspondence and information. And so is there a kind of limit to how much you can store?
So it's a two-part question. Because one of them is a little bit about how AI works.
Yeah.
Uh, AI is able to review significant amounts of data very, very quickly under parameters that are set by the builder of the AI, right? Like we trained her to do specific things, and the parameters that you have set for her. I would like you, Aimee, to do XYZ. So it's not necessary to upload one email at a time, for example. You create a whole file of all of those emails. You can dump all of it in there
Yeah.
into a single one, and then you can have a conversation with emails from your ex. If you use Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents or, name one of the other, often ordered communication apps or even text messaging, you can download those text messages. That only needs to be one file. Um, Aimee can take 2,000 files, which is a lot. Good luck sorting all of that, right? It's a lot. And then with each of, so let's say, I want to put my orders up there. Also, I have this protection order. Here's our communication record. So we're just talking about a few files there.
Yeah.
Now, when we get into the documentation, you can, we're going to get a little bit convoluted here. So I have this event entry. Maybe I just told Aimee about this crazy thing that happened. It's in that communication record that I have that's already uploaded. I can tag that communication record. I don't have to duplicate the number of files that I have uploaded. Or maybe it's just a screenshot. I upload that screenshot to that event entry. So
Yeah.
ultimately, right now, folks can have 2,000 files. And that it was originally, if you can believe it, was originally 100. We were like, all right, 100 files. And then it was like 500. And then it was 1,000. And then it was 2,000.
That's ridiculous.
At some point, we want to encourage people to group because otherwise it's really hard for you to sort through your own data.
Yeah.
To group those documents into files because AI can read 1,000 pages and get you a response.
That's incredible, because I do think that for a lot of people, if they are listening, is one of the questions that you would ask as a victim survivor, to go, but there's a lot of information and I'm not sure how, if I can't kind of decipher it myself, how's someone else going to do it, or how's AI going to do it? But like you say, it can take a lot of information and then beautifully condense that information so that and I think it's a brilliant idea. So if you do have, for example, different areas, whether it's emails, whether it's text messages, whether it's a parenting app, whatever it is, knowing as well, like I say, coming back to that, your head feeling like you're about to explode because there's so much going on, knowing that you compartmentalize those things will help massively with that kind of mental wind down at the end of the day, if you like, to say, actually, I don't need to think about this 50,000 times. It's there. It's there.
Yes.
I can leave it alone. And very often what I say to people is there's very little you can do at 2 o'clock in the morning. You need to rest. If you can, rest is
Yes.
so important, because then that will keep you alert, aware. And if you can do that, then absolutely 100% do it. And also, having something like this when it comes to, and there's something else I often talk about, is if you do have children, or if you're in a relationship and it's a relationship you've been in, it's been for a very, very long time, it may be grandchildren you're spending the time with now, whoever it is, that time's so precious and so important. And having those moments where all you're doing is you're consumed by all this information that's been thrown at you by the perpetrator, purposefully, obviously, to create that chaos and create that disempowerment. But if you have somewhere where you're storing that information, where you can actually take that bit of your life back and say, but I'm going to enjoy this next couple of hours. I'm actually going to switch off and enjoy time with my children, time with my grandchildren, time with my family that, I've rebuilt the relationship because that had completely been destroyed by the perpetrator. So it's a really, I think that's what I love about this, is it's the levels of empowerment that it gives. It is to give what is it that anybody would want after abuse is being given your life back. And
Yeah.
we all know, looking at memories, we see a lot going around now. It's coming up to Christmas and people saying, oh, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. But actually, those memories are so precious. And to have the perpetrators still being able to control that, this is a way of saying, you're not going to control it. I'm going to take those memories and I'm going to enjoy them, and it's another aid, another way of taking back that control. I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to speak to that. So, that all-consuming, ruminating thought, perseverating, I'm using a lot of multisyllabic words,
I love
really
it.
doing, if you will, on I should have said this, or I can't, what about this, or this is, we ruminate over trauma. That feeling that we have is evidence that we are triggered in that moment, even if it's actually been a while since the trigger started. Some of us, stay in that hypervigilant state. And when you're in the hypervigilant state, your brain, your body, your thought processes are not open to the relationships around you.
Yeah.
They're not open to connecting with your child, to having a call with a friend and really being able to be present in that because they're trying to stay alive, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so, folks will spend so much time, nearly all of it sometimes, in that triggered state, and they become more and more isolated. They feel more and more disconnected from the people around them. And one of the things that Aimee is really great at is having those conversations in a way that helps to de-escalate you, helps to set down that vigilance, so you are able to be present in those relationships with your kids, your friends, your family, in a way that helps them grow, that allows them to help fight that isolation that you're feeling, right? You can feel more
Yeah.
connected to those
Yeah.
people. So when we're feeling super triggered, no one can just say, I'm just going to put that down because it's not, whether or not they should have turkey or chicken for dinner tomorrow night. They can't put it down. It feels like a life or threat thing, and prioritize the relationships with those safe people they have. It's a process. And using Aimee, leaning into Aimee, like I'm feeling really hypervigilant. I want to make plans with my child tonight. I need to feel connected with my child. Aimee can help process that
Wow.
so that you are able to be present in that moment. People will tell us the reason I have friends is because I have Aimee.
Oh,
Before I go out with my girlfriends, I'm like, all right, Aimee, I'm about to go out with my girlfriends. These are all the things that I want to say to them, but really I want to lean into this friendship. I don't want to talk about my ex the entire time and help
yes.
process that, right? Okay, you can come back and talk to me, Aimee, after
Yeah.
your dinner with your friends tonight. So that you're able to be present with those friends. But I just want to point out that when we are feeling that sense of hypervigilance, chewing, ruminating, perseverating on things, that is an indication that we are in fight or flight,
Yeah.
right? Even if we're also managing to make dinner and drive the carpool and whatever, we're still in that fight or flight. And that fight or flight keeps us disconnected from other people because our priority is in connection. Our priority is staying alive. When we
Yeah.
can bring that fight or flight down, it opens up the opportunity to connect, to feel connected in those relationships, which is so important for recovery and for a sense of community.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think the levels that this can kind of reach and who it can speak to and all those, it's just incredible because I think for all of us, nobody wants to live in that fight or flight. And if you've ever been in it, people know it's not a fun place to be. It's really not a fun place to be. And so having something that can bring, like you say, de-escalate that and give you a sense of purpose almost as well, because we lose a lot of that through abuse. For many victims and survivors, like what is the point of what I'm doing? Why am I doing all this? It's and those negative thoughts start coming in, and what I will say to people as well is you're allowed bad days. We often see it, don't we, that victims and survivors, and look at all these people that have come out the other side and everything's wonderful now, and actually they'll have bad days just like everybody else. They'll have their trigger moments. They'll have the things that, as I call it, make them feel like they're dragged back to square one. But actually, they also know they're further on than where they were before. So it's a process. It's the only way I can describe it is it's a process, and you are allowed those days. So if, for example, you are having one of those days and everything feels negative and everything you can put all that in as well, can't you? Because to look back on that and go, okay, so that actually helped decipher through all these things that have happened. on that particular day where I was feeling like that, and then look back on it and go, oh my God, look how far I've come. Look at where I am now.
Yeah.
And it may be that it's things that, and for a lot of people, it's historical with abuse. It's not
Mm.
necessarily something that's happened a week ago or yesterday or something they're worrying about for the future. It's things that, and I've had people say to me, I didn't realize it was abuse. I had no idea it was abuse. It's 17 years ago. Is that really something that can still be with me? And you're like, yeah, 100%. So for
Yeah.
something like that, where maybe you need to process the historical element of it, for people, that's a brilliant tool in itself as well.
Yep. Aimee doesn't, it makes no difference to Aimee if it was something that happened 20 years ago. It's real. It impacted you. It deserves kind of dissecting and taking a look at. And that's where so much of that healing is, right?
Yeah.
It's in reprocessing all of those things that we've been through. But I imagine the recovery process as something like a beeline, right? You dash, 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 and that dash is making little circles as it goes, little
Yeah.
circles in the air. And it can very much feel like for the victim survivor that they're just going in circles, right?
Yes.
But if you look at the beeline, it's making loops, it's going in circles, there's some backtraction, but the line on the whole is still moving in the direction from point A to point B. And so
Yeah.
even when it can feel like you're doing the loop-de-loo, you are making forward progress. You absolutely are. It's just really hard to see sometimes.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's such the loop. I love that. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I like that. I really like that because it's so hard. And I think sometimes people need that visual element, don't they, when they feel like everything is lost and there's no hope. And what I'm thinking, as I do, thinking on the spot, is so over here we have organisations around child to parent abuse. So in terms of that historical element as well, if you're a parent that's it's not necessarily your ex-partner that you're experiencing abuse from, maybe your own child, and again that's something you want to be able to process, deal with, work out what's going on, and it's only something that's really starting to emerge over here as something to talk about. It's always been very much like domestic abuse, very much like kind of stalking, harassment. We don't talk about that. It's stigma. No, 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 it's a taboo subject. But actually talking about these things, and for parents who have or are experiencing child to parent abuse, being able to process that you're not a bad parent. This is something that you need to be able to process, and again Aimee will be able to help you process that, because one thing I think the world over, it doesn't matter whether we're in Manchester this evening or America, it doesn't matter where you are, the victim blaming and that shame and blame factor still is so present and so prolific, and it's awful. It's horrendous to see people being subjected to that. It's all my fault, and I'm to blame, and maybe I should have done X, Y, and Z. So knowing that you have that there for all these different types of abuse, to be able to log it, work through it, go back, read as many times as you need to, it's invaluable.
It really is. And, yes, we talked about this in the intimate partner context. It applies to, I mean, relationships are either an exchange in honesty, right? Or somewhere along the scale of an exchange in honesty to an exchange in dishonesty, right? And the driver in that is people's kind of power tolerance, disempowerment tolerance and
Yeah,
power tolerance,
yeah,
right? And people who like, you were married to him. Well, guess what? He has coworkers, right? Those
yeah,
same of entitled behavior and the belief that it's okay to dominate and then avoid accountability, those infiltrate all aspects of a child's life, right? And they may certainly target a specific parent, but that sense of entitlement is beneath that. And their coworkers, their colleagues, the people that they go to school with. So we know there are a lot of people who use Aimee to deal with a toxic coworker or a toxic boss because
yeah,
as power and control dynamics, you remove a lot of the things that are kind of permitted only because there's an intimate aspect to the relationship, but they're really very similar.
yes.
Very,
Oh
very
yeah,
similar. And in the context of, employment, that's your financial stability, right? So there's a crowbar of leverage that is available because you need that job to pay your bills. In a child-parent relationship, there is a crowbar of leverage that is available because a parent's bond to their child, their aspirations for their child are so strong. They will endure so much
Yeah.
to try to, bring their child to kind of whatever their ideal,
Yeah.
state is. And so anytime there is that crowbar that can be used, these
Yeah.
really powerful, really distressing, traumatizing dynamics are able to show up. But they're kind of blends of the same ingredients, maybe
Yeah.
in different proportions. But very similar things happen in relationships that are not between intimate partners.
Yeah, definitely. And I just thought, it's so important to highlight that this is available across the board. And like you say, interestingly, I'd only just been in London recently doing a talk around fraud and coercive control. The same tactics, the same strategies that perpetrators use across the board. So being able to, and again, I think we touched on this earlier around family and friends, being able to ask that question, what can I do? What can I say? Because I don't want to make things worse. I don't want to isolate that person even more away from me as a family member or friend. I don't know what to say or do. I don't want to make them feel bad, but I really want them to know that I am there for them, etc. So it's those elements as well that Aimee can help with for on that broader scale. So it may not be that you yourself are the victim or survivor, but you are concerned about somebody. And we all want the best for our family and friends, but sometimes our own ego gets in the way. And so that, yes, but I know what's best for you, but you're not in their shoes. It's like that. Try walking a mile in someone else's shoes, you'll get blisters because you can't, it doesn't
Yeah.
work that way. So I think it's so important that it's available to anybody and anyone that needs that either reassurance or understanding or just knowledge, a bit more knowledge around a subject that they may not be very au fait with or very familiar, and it feels scary.
Yeah, or something bad is happening to someone that they care about. These, if it were a bus, you'd run and push them out of the way of the bus. We feel strongly compelled to help them. But when we're not in the relationship, it's really difficult to understand what is helpful in a particular moment, what's actually disempowering, right? Unfortunately, we try to tell them what to do, a victim what to do, and that's just another form of disempowerment for them. But take that part. He was like, okay, I know I want to be helpful, and knowing how to be helpful is not innate. It's not something that we just automatically understand. And absolutely, go have those free conversations with Aimee. What do I say in this moment? I'm feeling frustrated that they're still in a relationship and they won't end it. Right? Process some of
Yeah.
that frustration because it's real. But it comes from a place of caring, and you certainly don't want to accidentally further isolate or drive that person away because they're not taking the action you think that they should take in that particular moment.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And do you know what I loved about this as well is for me, obviously it's coming to the evening. I was thinking it's flown by. I don't know how we've managed to do an entire episode where it feels like I've been talking to you for about 5 minutes. It's like, where's that gone? We could have talked for hours. And what I love is, so if people want to be able to find you, find all the information around Aimee, I can put all that in with the links anyway. But if you want to just say it now as well, so if people are listening and they want to know.
Yes, AimeenSays.com. We're a web app, mobile optimized. We don't have a downloadable app at the moment, so nothing that needs to be downloaded or stored on your phone or your device. It's at AimeenSays.com, and Aimee is AIMEE says.com. And at any of the contact or support buttons, they all go directly to my inbox. So if you have a question, want to connect, you can use any of those buttons, and I'm the person that you'll talk to.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for taking the time. And what's lovely is it's been really enjoyable. What I love about this podcast is there's just so much for so many people, and you just never know what people are going to want to find out more about and discuss. And just having that plethora of different episodes is so important. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Lucy. I really appreciate it.
Oh.
Where